I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as customary, I'd like to have a moment of silence, and in your thoughts, please keep in your thoughts the Yarmouth police officer who gave his life for his on duty, the duty of his job, Mr. Officer Sean Gannon, and his family. Thank you. I need to announce that this meeting is being recorded and televised by a local cable company. I need a motion for approval of bill and payroll warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor? Aye. I need a motion to accept the correspondence in our read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And is there anybody here who wishes to speak in public forum? A lot of people, but nobody in public. Okay. Approval of meeting minutes, open session, April 3rd, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Do I hear any discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and before we get into new business, I'd like to just apologize. We're a little bit late. We started about 10 minutes late due to technical difficulties with our cable. It's been corrected. We wanted to make sure that our audience saw the complete meeting and not just part of it. So thank you for your patience. At that, we'll go to new business, Finance Committee discussion, annual and special town meeting warrant. Frank, you want to go
Sure.
lead into it?
As you know, the Finance Committee and I have been meeting and working on the budget analysis. We met, I met along with the chairman of the Finance Committee with the school committee last week to discuss the budget that was certified and the ability of the towns to meet that assessment. I'm not going to reiterate everything I said at the meeting. The salient points are that the budget grows at the rate of 4 to 4.5% on a, or more, on a $48 million budget, which is what we're in this year. The increase was close to $1.4 million. The school committee is reconsidering its number, and will be coming back with another number, perhaps the same one, but more likely a slightly lesser number next Wednesday. I would expect to see it in the 9 to 9.5% area. Whether it's 9% or 11%, the budget is devastating to the town. Because the ability to grow and meet these budgets is constrained by Proposition 2.5 and the makeup of our tax base. We are primarily a residential community. We don't have rapid growth or significant growth in the commercial and industrial area, which is one of the things you need when you're trying to feed a growing budget. The look back over the past 10 years reflects that we have contributed well in excess of 70% of our new growth to the schools each year. That number is significant, but it's not enough. We'll grow 800 and some odd thousand this year. The budget request speaks for itself. The only way the schools can raise money is through the appropriation in Chapter 70, some grants, and the balance is an assessment to the towns. I kind of explained the budget process like an inverted pyramid. the schools meet each year, they establish what it's going to cost to deliver the services that they're expected to deliver. And it builds up, and when they reach the point where they've calculated all those services, they then have to calculate the assessments in order to pay for that. We work the other way around. We start with what we know what our levy limit is, and then we work down through the budgets. So there's always conflict between the two approaches. I have said at the school committee meeting, I said at a meeting earlier with the school committee, and I made the statement here, we don't have control of our destiny as it comes to finances. The towns have to figure out what kind of community they want to be. Do we want to have do we want to support the services that we currently offer? And that includes schools. You know, when people look for a place to live, typically your growth in towns comes from younger people moving in, older people retiring, and otherwise leaving the town. So if you're going to draw young people and you want to grow, you're going to have to do it by offering the things that are important to them. And one of the most important factors in selecting a community for a young family is what kind of schools they offer. Quality of schools drives a lot of those decisions. We have been fortunate over the years to have a good, well-balanced school system, but we're beginning to lose it. We have less services. We have limited language arts in the middle school. There's, I believe, is it 2 or 3 classes in language at the middle?
2, I believe. And
2.
You're not accommodating all the students.
So you have 530 students in the middle school, and basically 50, 55 of them can take a language. The rest have no option because it's not there. Now, we do offer language arts in the high school, but we don't offer the level of options that we should be offering. So when the schools come and present a budget, what they're trying to do is meet the basics. Unfortunately, the budget's like a snowball rolling downhill. It just keeps picking up depth as it rolls. When I met with the school committee last week, I presented the one suggestion that the finance committee had at that point, which was a question of whether a 5% budget would be practical. And the answer was a resounding no. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what we've done to get to this point, how we've looked at the requests and trimmed them, and what we're left with. So, Rick, unless you want to kick on, I'll...
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much summarizes. I mean, everybody at this point is pretty much aware of what was discussed last week at the school committee meeting. And I think it's important that we continue the discussion. We are obviously have a unique situation here while we're waiting for the schools to certify a budget number. We still have to move forward with recommendations for the rest of the budget here in the town of Whitman. So appreciate the opportunity to have this collective meeting and talk about the challenges that we're facing. So that's about it.
Okay, looking at the town warrant, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, doesn't...
You have a graphic presentation of the warrant. If you start with page 4, what you'll see is the articles that we just went through and said, can't do it. So we struck Article 9, 10, and 11, which are vehicles for the DPW. I have a question mark on Article 16, which is a vehicle for the fire department. Article 18, which was renovation of the armory, was struck. Article 21, which was a request to appropriate money for radio network was stricken. Article 23, which is a request for 2 vehicles for the police department, has been reduced to 1. 24, 25, 26, and 27, which are expenditures that were requested originally from the levy and are now going to be paid for out of the reserve for appropriation motor vehicle account, are adjusted. The X's simply indicate that we made those changes. You go to the next page, Article 30, the chief had suggested that we appropriate money to conduct a assessment center for chief and deputy. Seeing no movement today, I struck that. No money for it. The proposal to do carpeting at the town library was one of the first strikes. The repairs to the roof were stricken because we're going to take a less costly approach using an appropriation we already have to try and do repairs in the center lower area of the roof to see if that works. If not, that's going to be back on. The money to make masonry repairs at the town hall, they're not critical, but they will become critical. That's stricken. Asbestos remediation in the old police station, we don't currently have an operating plan for it. We're using the garage and we're using a storage area. There's no need to make that change today. 9,000 to seal coat parking lots, once again defer it. The 55,000 to replace the, we're getting into articles that may benefit the schools. For the fire alarm panel at the Conley, certified, it's working. That's stricken. We are recommending 35,000 for security, physical security changes in the buildings at the Conley and the Duval, similar to what was done with the middle school. There's a question of whether we're going to be supporting cameras in those schools right now. They have fixed cameras. Request has been made to update those to the more current technology that allows you to pan and view and has better resolution. I say it's a question mark because it is a security measure. But someone's going to have to determine how critical that is.
Frank, could I speak on the cameras, just one additional?
Can we get
item?
through this and then
Okay.
we'll welcome the comments? 125,000 for the roadway repairs at the high school has been removed. 134,000 to resurface the outdoor track has been removed. And then the balance of the articles are primarily absolute essentials or debt payments that we've already committed to. What I'm saying is we've gone bare bones. And there's a danger with this because we're now removing items that involve capital maintenance. And we know what happens if you don't maintain things. And having removed all of those things and having worked through that process, with the current assessment, we're still $1 million short. I'm sorry, Fred, I didn't mean to stop you.
Oh, no problem. I just want to, the other item with the cameras, one of, to me, a very important aspect is the police would have the ability to be seeing those cameras at the station. So there would be remote access as well, which we currently don't have. Just wanted to make sure I brought that.
I think that was understood by this board in the last meeting.
And I think it's important to understand as well that the Finance Committee has yet to make recommendations on any of
Right.
these warrant articles as well, because there are certain scenarios that we're gonna discuss tonight that may take some of these, and as Frank mentioned, some of these are critically important, you know, and they're only being deferred. but we're gonna look at budget scenarios that may reinstate some of them, or may actually remove additional ones, so
Now,
it's important to know.
I will also tell you that I met with Superintendent Whitner last week on Tuesday. Rick and I and Lisa, and who else was there? Obviously the superintendent, the business manager, the new superintendent. And we talked about the budget. We talked a lot about it. And I made the same statement I've made several times over the last few months, that we don't have the ability to generate enough revenue to pay for what I consider to be basic needs. I think that having a well-developed and supported educational system is a key to having a good community, a community where people want to live. Our options are very limited. We're not accessible enough to be a commercially developed town, and even if we were, we're rapidly running out of land, although somehow residential developers still seem to be finding parcels to work with.
Well, Frank, my take on, and I'll let the rest of the board speak on it after I'm done. My take on it is that all the things that we've X'd out to take a second look at it through the eyes of the FinCom, most of them, if not like 90%, are safety issues, such as police, fire, and DPW. I mean, trucks to plow the street, cruisers to make sure that there's cruisers on the street to protect us, fire, vehicles, and the fire department to make sure that they're there on time and they're doing their job for our community. Those are items that someday, they thought they were needed this year, and if we can't afford them, what are we gonna look at next year? We gotta look in the future. And I know there's been a talk about having a capital plan, but if we had a capital plan, we just X out 90% of our capital plan on items just this year alone. This is very difficult. I mean, I haven't seen something like this since 2.5, Frank. And I tell you, if we can't come up with the money, no way am I a fan of doing layoffs or anything like that in this town. I will not even consider that, me personally. But I don't know what we're gonna do. I am glad I'm not on the finance committee this year. Right, you guys are gonna have your committee's gonna have to have an unbelievable task in front of you. Because there's no yeses or nos, it's let's do the best we can with what we've got. That's my opinion.
Yeah, part of the issue too is the amount of time that we're now trying to compress these decisions in.
Right, exactly.
I mean, there's no doubt that we need more long-term planning. There's no doubt about
Right.
that at all. But in the interim, we must obviously have several scenarios that we have to look at.
Right. And, would an extra month giving you better time to look at things? Possibly, but, I mean, maybe it's time that budgets don't need to be in, should be in well before January, maybe November. Right after, because usually we used to do them right after Christmas Day come in, the budgets? But
Yeah.
when it's this tough, and you're looking at it, you're saying it's gonna be a difficult year, and ask your department heads to come in with budgets, it's around Thanksgiving, so you can at least look at them.
Yeah. There's
It
no
might
doubt
be a
that
big
that's
help,
going to be the
big help.
case next year.
Does anybody on that board like to speak on it? Randy?
Do you guys have some scenarios that you were gonna go over tonight?
Yeah, next thing we're gonna go through, and Frank will lead the discussion, we're gonna take a walk through Article 2, which has obviously the big numbers in there that we're really waiting. To make these decisions, we have to get the certified budget final number from the schools. So,
Now, I'm going to say that there are only a couple of options here. There isn't enough money to fund the $31 million that's being requested, and that's collectively for the schools and the town. So we have eliminated new requests, which is what the articles are. They're new requests. We're just trying now to live with the budget we created last year. Last year, we increased the school budget by $1 million. That became the base on which we're looking at an increase this year for $2 million. So once again, the S word, sustainability. We're either looking at significant reductions across the board, schools and town. The only other option we have is additional revenue. And right now, the only additional revenue that's available is the levy that we generate under Proposition 2.5. That's it. I don't see any other alternatives. You know, we talk about capital money. 2010, we started building a police station. For various reasons, the appropriation was done inside the levy limit, with the understanding that that debt would be serviced by free cash from year to year, using a large portion of the free cash that we generate in order to pay that debt. The free cash comes from a number of sources. 500 of it comes from intercharges with the sewer and water enterprise for costs that are shared from their revenue. The balance of free cash comes from unspent portions of the budgets at the end of the year, redemptions from tax title, and other unanticipated revenues. And we've gone as high as $1.8 million one year. We've gone as low as $500,000 in the last 15 years. But that's our capital money, and we don't have any. Hence, we don't have a capital plan.
Plus, we've spent a lot of capital money for the redoing of the high school for the PK at our special
Well,
town meeting that we had.
We had an opportunity over the last couple of years to use additional money that was generated from personal property growth from National Grid, from the utilities. But that's amortizing out.
Yeah.
This year alone, it's dropping $18 million in value. It's dropped $30 million in 3 years. That money's gone in another 4 years. The debt, not the debt, the tax burden remains with us. It just shifts to the residents. So there has to be a way to deal with this, and the way to deal with it is not locally, because we don't have the ability to make those determinations. It has to be done at the state level. I shared with the school committee a little story about when I moved here. I was living in New Jersey, one of the more affluent communities there, great school system, lots of tax dollars. A lawsuit was filed in federal court challenging the constitutionality of funding education with property taxes, because it meant that poorer communities couldn't provide adequate schools as wealthy communities could. Well, they were successful in their suit. And in June, the federal court ordered the state of New Jersey to either find a constitutional way to fund the schools or shut them down. The legislature's out. They're not serious. We'll continue along the way we are. On August 30th, Judge Stern, who was the presiding justice at the time, ordered the state to close its schools until they had a constitutional way to fund them. August 31st, the legislature met in a night session and voted to establish an income tax for the state that had none, at 3%. And that money went to fund the schools. And it worked great for a number of years. Of course, they've outrun it. And now, once again, communities are struggling to come up with the difference between what the state supports and what we support. We're ripe for that same situation. We have a real dichotomy, real imbalance in our ability to deliver quality education throughout the Commonwealth. We have good schools, we have bad schools, we have good communities, we have bad communities. Shouldn't be. And the only relief we're going to get is if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts takes a different approach. And the only way that's going to happen is if the communities, all of the communities, band together and demand that the state reconfigure the appropriation structure to ensure that there's adequate money for education. Because then all you're going to hear is, well, there's no money for roads, there's no money for this, there's no money for that. But I would argue that most of the state operations are overhead, not production. And, you know, that may be the only way out of this. Because even if we were able to find that money this year, it won't be there next.
Tough situation. Scott,
Correct.
you have anything to add, Scott? Questions, your opinion?
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
We all know that. Brian?
Well, I concur with what Frank said. This is a legislature problem here. We have a failure by our legislature to take care of what they've been saying that they would do all along. Now, we're not in a unique position here. There are many other towns in this Commonwealth that are in the same boat, and that boat is sinking. We have our affluent communities that are going to be able to withstand this kind of problem. But the blue-collar towns in the urban areas, they're not going to be able to survive this. But we are definitely not alone in this problem. But I would say that a good portion of the blame goes to the state for how they've handled this. You know, we take some responsibility because maybe we didn't react soon enough when they reduced their revenues coming to the towns. So we take some of that responsibility. But that doesn't change the pickle that we're in. And now we've pretty much are in a position where we have to unconsciously pit departments against each other, which nobody here wants to do. So we have to come up with some out-of-the-box solutions here, or we're looking at probably overrides, restructuring of debt, layoffs. These are all things that have to be on the table. And unfortunately, in my time here, which is considerable, I don't recall us being in this kind of position in quite some time. And it's disheartening because this is a great community. We have great administrators, great teachers, great management. And this really is becoming none of these people's fault that we're in this position. And if anybody can come up with a great solution to this for this year, I'm ready to hear it. But we have to come up with a long-term solution to control costs. Costs are what's killing us. We have unfunded mandates. We have retirement. It's going to get worse instead of better. So if we don't come up with some kind of long-term solution to control our costs, it's going to get much, much worse.
Frank, I know that we still have some time because the Finance Committee still has to make recommendations as far as posting the annual town meeting before we vote on it and sign it. But
That'll
we
be
need to
ready
do
for
the special
signature
tonight.
next week, the
Right,
special.
so we're having a meeting next week, so we'll be able to get that. But the special needs to be signed tonight and posted, so,
We plan on voting those articles tonight.
all right, so do we look at the articles on the special and vote?
You have the special in front of you. It's really simple. There's 5 articles on it. Article 1 is to give, the board has discussed the issue of perhaps reducing local speed limits. And that's on there to give the board the authority to make that determination. That was under the Governor's Municipal Modernization Act. Article 2 is on both the special and the annual. It'll obviously be only acted on in one, but if we don't have a quorum for the special, we still need the vote, so it's going to be on both.
Right, okay. So we made, right, okay.
And that is to vote to authorize $280,000 to fund the purchase and upgrading of streetlights. We have grants in place that, if approved, will cover that cost. If it's not, then we will need a few years of cost reductions to pay for the cost, which is why I'm
Right.
requesting it be done this way, so that we borrow, we service the debt from the reduction in expenditures on lighting if we don't get the grants. If we get the grants, we simply pay it off. Article 3 is a vote to appropriate $323,144 from sewer and water retained earnings to pay the debt authorized for the meter and water main replacement program. The reasoning behind that is until those meters are installed and we start seeing a return on that investment, we need to pay the debt the first year. So as that money comes in, we'll then be able to service that debt within the regular rate structure. So that's a year 1 payment. Article 4, I will correct it before it's posted. It should say, a transfer of $175 for a longevity payment that wasn't made in 2016. Article 5 is a request to transfer $1,000 from a custodial services line to pay for the cost of the town clerk's certification as a mass certified clerk. That is under
Right.
general law that we have accepted. That source would also be the same for the Article 4. So that's the warrant. That's the whole warrant.
Okay. So basically, with the exception of Article 2, none of it has an effect on the annual town meeting as far as the budget is concerned? Except for that $1,000 to Article 5?
No.
But short money?
No, these,
They're being-
budget and levy are two different things.
Right. So, all right, so it doesn't have
None
any
of these have an impact
on our levy?
on the levy.
Right.
They do have a budget impact.
Right. So do we need a motion to vote on this, that was accepted, to sign it? Or do you want to?
Do you want to talk about it?
I'm actually not comfortable voting anything right now because although I've heard some fantastic things that have pointed out the problems that I know we're in, you know, I hear a lot, you know, taxes in our town are low, they need to come up. I don't exactly agree with that. I do think we need to find some other revenue source. I absolutely believe that we need to try and restructure the police station debt. That would free up about $860,000 to put back into the levy.
Well, not restructure, but take it out of the levy.
Well, take it out, right, restructure the debt. I also know that because of unfunded and underfunded mandates, such as transportation, that also is putting a tremendous demand on our school system. I can't blame it all on our taxpayers, because by no means is it the ability of our taxpayers that's causing this issue. It's basically a culmination of a perfect storm. But what we need to realize is We absolutely are not making that this year. We know right now we can't come up with 11.5% for the schools. I think everyone in this room would be in agreement that without an override and a massive restructure, because I don't even think rebonding the police station gets us there, 11.5% isn't an option. But I think, and something I always said that aggravated Rick when I was on the FinCom is that I would not strip mine departments for another. And I think we need to look very hard this year that we are now, 5% I don't think can even be an option for us to proceed with our schools this year. Because you might as well decimate them at
Right.
5%. So I would ask your board to go back and at least remove that number and figure it something higher. Because I think we owe a little more to our kids than what they're getting now. We need to have kids that are going out in the workforce and they're competitive, beyond competitive, not just getting by. Because what's coming out right now, they are not afforded the advantages that other school systems have. Whether that's things like coding, language, something needs to be done, and it has to start with the people in this room. And I think is actually everyone getting on board that we have a problem, and just by shouting out numbers isn't fixing it. Saying what we could have done isn't fixing it. I was a big proponent of let's get a group together with the school committee. We should have done that. That should have been done in July, where we're working on this. So we're coming up with a unified plan between both towns, both boards, finance committees, to present in fairness, whether it be by a raise of taxes, whether it be some slight concessions by the school committee. But we need a unified plan. If it's a unified school district, we need a unified plan. And going at this from 4 different directions obviously isn't working.
We did that once before, and it kind of blew up in our face when I was on the finance committee, and I'll explain to you later. Well, what my concern, Frank, is that when does this have to be posted, the special town meeting, huh? Yeah, but it's just 1 minute. When does this have to be posted?
This week.
So does it have to be posted with our signature?
Yep.
So basically, we have to wait till after they meet, and then we'll go in and we'll sign it with their recommendations in the selectman's office, and then we posted it with time.
It's up to the board whether they want to sign with or without their recommendations. The recommendations would be added anyway.
Right.
So not part of the article.
Right.
Your signature is that you have reviewed and presented this warrant for action at town meeting.
Okay. So at this time, we don't have to vote
This
whether we
is the
approve it.
special, this is not the annual.
Right.
The annual will have to be posted after our next meeting.
Okay. So this can't be posted no later than Wednesday? Or
Thursday?
Thursday? So it's whether the board wants to wait and see what the FinCom recommendations are before we sign them, or we sign it tonight. Any way you look at it, I mean, it is what it is. We're not signing it to recommend it, we're signing it that the articles, we've
Well,
reviewed the articles.
you're signing it to present it to the voters.
Right.
to say, this is what we are asking the voters to do.
Well, then I would make the suggestion we'd wait till Thursday to see what the recommendations are. What do you think, Frank?
You have to meet
Oh, all right.
to vote that.
So then we need, all right, so do we need a motion to sign this, or just sign it?
The warrant has to be voted.
All right.
I mean, if there's something on the warrant we want to talk about, we should put that on the table right now.
Right.
Let's go over the Article 2 then, Frank.
Can I just, Mr. Chairman, just follow up on Randy's comment? Well said. All your comments were well said. I just wanted to clarify that the 5% I presented to the school committee last week was a result of the concurrence of this board. I think it's important to note that as the chairman of the finance committee, I need to take the recommendations of the full board, not my own
Right.
individual opinions. So I think it's good that we're having this discussion about this, but the draft Article 2 that you have in front of you has a heading, and it has a what-if scenario heading. And Frank and I met earlier today to kind of finalize this, and it has 3 scenarios in it that need to be considered. And I think it's important that it's done in this joint session so that the selectmen can be part of the process as well.
That being said, Sean, you had something to say?
I do, yeah.
Good.
Well, if we look back at the year, I'm a strong proponent in evidence-based practice. And I think what Randy said, I agree with what he said. And coming up, being proactive and meeting with departments early, I think is huge. But there are other logistical things that I think we need to implement. We talked about these early in September. We presented to this board. Well, we were hoping to present before Christmas, but it ended up getting pushed back. And then since that time, Mr. Cordero and Mr. Anderson talked about the spending issue, which I completely agree with. They were asking for $2.6 million over the budget at the time. And then the fire chief came in, and he took some pretty big shots at these guys. And if I disagree with them, I disagree because they haven't been aggressive enough. I think we need a capital plan. I don't think that's some progressive thing that we should be doing. I think that's basic due diligence. I think we need a strategic plan. I'll give you just one quote, and this is from the Managing Fire and Rescue Services manual. So this is the manual that the fire chief often refers to. It says, the strategic plan, roadmap for the future. To ensure that the operation of the fire department meets all the internally and externally established requirements, a process to produce a written strategic plan is important. The strategic plan is an organizational roadmap for the future. As such, the plan must be reflected in the department's budget. Few goals are achieved without money, so the plan should serve as a blueprint for constructing the department's budget. Thus, it is critically important, I'll read that again. It is critically important that the department's strategic plan and budget development cycles be synchronized with each other. That's in his manual. That's evidence-based practices. Those things aren't going to get us the money we need this year, of course, but they will make our departments efficient and transparent. You have a strategic plan, you have a capital plan, you put those up on the website so people can read through them thoroughly. They know that you're intelligent. This is the word that Mr. Hickey would use from Social Vote.
Yeah.
He wants to be very intelligent when he stands up and presents his budget. We don't have those things. We don't have a strategic plan. We don't have a capital plan. We can't make an accurate financial forecast. We don't have financial policy in place. Those are the logistical things we should be doing right now. The Finance Committee doesn't write policy. That's not what we do. We made recommendation about policy that we'd like to see implemented. What action has been taken this year? Think about those things and take action. Make a motion, bring up an initiative, start scheduling meetings. Let's do it early so that this time next year we're ahead of the curve.
I really hadn't intended to reply, but I'm going to. Sean, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your efforts to get your point across. There's a couple of things you need to recognize. One, you are part of a committee. This discussion occurred in your committee. You have been zealous about establishing a capital plan this year. I made it very clear to you in February and to your committee that we were not prepared with the roadblocks or the bricks that we needed to build that. You don't adopt a plan and then say, here it is. You have to know where it's coming from. I really enjoy your comments about capital improvements because right now we have no revenue source for capital. The one revenue source we might have for capital is committed to paying for a debt that already exists. So if you're the guy that has the answers, tell me where it's coming from. You know as much about the revenue in this town as everyone else at this table. We have a fixed tax rate, we get 2.5% a year, and we get growth. We have budget growth at the rate of 10 or 11% a year. You explain to me how that works. And more importantly, explain to me how even if we didn't, we're going to have a capital plan to develop capital projects without a revenue source. I'd really like to hear that. Yeah.
I think there's a misperception that we only need a plan if there's growth. That is a clear misconception. We need a plan when there's not growth. When you're in a negative feedback loop, we're in triage. The plan tells us what to do. People need to see that we're in triage. They need to see the financial trends and see what we're struggling with so that this is an open, transparent process. Right now, we're a couple weeks before town meeting, and this is all hitting the papers now in really not a very transparent way. If this was clear, as it was, I think, to you, last year and the year before, that this is where we're headed, but it was also clear to the public, then this wouldn't be a new discussion. People would know what's going on, and they would see the triage that's about to come. Your job, I believe, as executives, is to set priorities. Executives set priorities. You can't pass the buck and say, we're not going to do that, we're not going to choose. I think that's what a leader does. We're in crisis, and we need leaders who are going to have swift, decisive action to help us get out of crisis. We don't need passive leadership right now, and I feel like we're getting passive leadership.
You're entitled to that opinion. I will tell you that there's nothing I said here this year that I didn't say last year when we got the $1 million budget. And we slashed and burned last year to meet that budget, and there were people here who were on that finance committee last year when we did that. So don't tell me it isn't a lack of planning.
I think it's a lack of initiative. The finance committee meets until, we have a 10 o'clock rule, and oftentimes we break that rule, and we're meeting weekly. I think you should set an agenda to meet on a weekly basis, fill your agenda with things like bylaws, and put together a budget document, talk about financial planning, stay until 10 o'clock at night on a weekly basis, and then pass policy. That's what I think we should be doing.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we could move back into the discussion for this year's budget, I'm mindful of the fact that we need to look ahead, but we really need to, in the amount of time that we have left before town meeting, we need to focus on this budget. So Frank, do you want to kind of go over the scenarios that we propose
Well,
here?
I think Dan had just brought up the special. I think we need to finish that discussion before we move on.
Would you like to get a vote at the finance committee on articles?
Well, I think there were questions. Randy, you had a question.
I just didn't know if you wanted to speak on, really, the giant one that stands out, obviously, is if you wanted to shed a little insight into Article 2, just...
Yeah, sure.
Just savings that
Did you find
is
a
going to
copy
be
of this?
reflected by putting that out.
Several weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we brought to the selectmen a request to authorize us to move ahead with purchasing streetlights. The Commonwealth provides the right to individual towns to purchase and own its streetlights. Our streetlights are owned by National Grid. They're on poles jointly owned by Verizon and National Grid. If we purchase the lights, the poles remain under the ownership of National Grid and Verizon, but the lights themselves become town property. What we're purchasing is the elbow-shaped, there's a word for it and it escapes me, the frame that holds the streetlights. What we would be doing is purchasing those fixtures and then attaching LED lights to those fixtures. The total cost to accomplish that is, I believe it's $279,600. I rounded up to 280. The money will pay for the acquisition and installation of streetlights throughout the town. What that will accomplish is it will enable us to eliminate the rental fee that we currently pay annually to National Grid. And the savings, which is estimated just on the rental, is, I believe, $68,000. What should tell you more than anything else, the practicality of this is the fact that the devices are now available to purchase from National Grid at no cost. They've been amortized. They have no value to National Grid. The money that we spend to upgrade the lights will save us a considerable amount of money in electrical use, because right now we pay to power those sodium vapor lights. And LED lights are much cheaper to operate. The process would involve a contract with a third party who would remove the existing headlights and install new ones in each of the fixtures, and then we would have a maintenance agreement so that a company can maintain those lights, replace them when necessary, and do repairs. As I mentioned earlier, the cost of this we're seeking to cover through a grant with the Green Communities and an MAPC grant for $50,000. And if we are successful in getting those grants, we'll have no out-of-pocket cost. If we're not, if we don't get the grant, then the money that we're borrowing is intended to pay for those fixtures and to pay for the cost of replacing the lights. And then as we reduce our cost for the street lights, the appropriation we've made will continue until they're paid for. And the difference between what we pay for energy and what we were paying for rentals will go toward amortizing the debt that we're seeking to take.
So this should pay for itself very shortly.
Well, the forecast is to pay off in 3.5 years. If we get the grants, they're paid off in a year.
Yeah,
Just
I
to
think
tell
it's a
you-
win-win. Yeah. it's a
Well, that
win-win.
was the decision the board made
Yeah.
several weeks ago, but in order to do that, we actually have to act on it.
Does anybody else have any questions on any of the other articles? Number 5?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In the interest of time for selectmen to vote the special town warrant, I would recommend that the finance committee in this session vote to recommend the articles in advance, if that would help. Does anybody have a problem with voting the articles in this form? With your indulgence, I'll pull the committee.
Go ahead.
I'll entertain a motion to accept Article 2.
Just further discussion on
Yes.
Frank, one question. Maintenance, any idea of what the annual maintenance on new LEDs may be?
The fixture cost is minimal because they have a long lifespan. The cost to contract with someone to be available will be a couple of $1,000s a month to do that and to maintain the lights. There are a number of communities that have already done this, Easton being one of them. And they've saved a considerable amount of money. We have less lights than some of the other communities, so at some point in time, that may be an issue too. Lights diffuse differently from LEDs than they do from sodium vapor. The sodium vapor is more of a sweeping light. The LEDs tend to be more focused.
Any further discussion on Article 2? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion?
Second. All in favor of accepting? All opposed? Abstain? 7-0-1. Article 3, entertain a motion to accept as presented.
Motion?
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? 7-0-1. Article 4, I'll entertain a motion to accept as presented.
So moved?
Second. Further discussion? All in favor of accepting? Opposed? Abstain? 7-0-1. And 5. Motion?
So moved?
Second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? 7-0-1. Here's your recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Article 1 doesn't need one?
Non-monetary.
There's no financial interest for the finance
No,
committee.
okay, yeah. Okay. Hearing that with the recommendation of the Finance Committee, I entertain a motion to accept the special town meeting as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 4, 0? Right? Okay. Done. We'll sign it. I guess that being said, with the Finance Committee, they can continue with their meeting, Frank? Is there anything else?
Craig, did you want to go over the scenarios here? Just
Oh, yeah.
briefly, we also, we're going to go through the Article 2 pretty quickly. We're not obviously going to go line by line. The Finance Committee has made recommendations on all but 36 lines from Article 2. But they're based on the proposals that are in these headings. And again, if you look at your what-if scenarios, you look at 3 specific headings, a proposal for 9.5 for the school assessment, the implications, a proposal for 7.25, and a proposal for 5. So what we did is we took the 9.5% increase over last year's budget proposal, the 5% that was recommended by this board last week, and then took a number that was right in the middle of those two. So,
Quick question on the 9.5, Rick. I did watch it on TV, wasn't there, but I just want to, 9.5 or less, I believe Dr. Whitner said this is when they start getting in the layoff range, correct?
that's correct. So, all of, the 9.5 and the 7.25 most likely are going to also either include layoffs or an override for the town. So I think it's important to note that, this is, we're looking for a operational override. We obviously recognize the challenges that the district has, and we're trying to present this in a way that is mindful of everybody's interests. So, Frank, if you want to go over what the bottom lines will be?
Sure. There are a couple of items in Article 2 that were changed or reduced. The Board of Selectmen set a 2% guide for non-contracted salaries. The requesters that exceeded that were communicated with and advised what our position was, and I believe they'll all be requesting that their numbers reflect the current recommendations. The budget recommendations that you have in front of you, I guess, are as much scenarios as a recommendation. I don't think any one of us is seriously recommending that Whitman Hanson accept 5%. Not unless they have some other pot of money that nobody knows about. So the budget adjustments that you will see, if you look at page, I believe it's 5, but let me check. Page 5, line 175. Is the operating budget for Whitman Hanson. There are 3 numbers that reflect in this worksheet. At 9.5, the budget request is $13,270,185. That's an increase over last year of $1,205,993. The original budget was an increase of $1,387,777. The 7.25 budget, and again, these are just numbers that were picked to demonstrate the impact. At a 7.25% increase in assessment, not budget, assessment, the budget line would be $12,938,846 and would represent an increase of $874,654. And then again, that 5%er would have ended up being 12,667,000, or an increase of 603,000. We are also looking at non-mandated busing. There was discussion about eliminating non-mandated busing in order to reduce the cost by 381,000. I think most of us agree that that would be a very difficult thing to do. Wouldn't save the schools any money because we have contracted routes. So what we're looking at is continuing to offer the busing, but perhaps subsidizing part of it rather than all of it. So, right now, we have 493 students. Sorry, we have 775 students that ride the bus within an area that is not mandated. Those are optional riders. The cost of that is $381,357. Cost per student is $493. What we're suggesting is to reduce that cost by a third by setting a user fee for non-mandated busing. If we did that, the user fee would be $165 a year per student. That would be payable from the family, and it would reduce the cost by $81,345. Again, the heading of this document is what if, so none of these things are etched in stone. It's merely a suggestion for another way to reduce some of the cost that the town is experiencing for non-mandated busing. The other reductions in the line were basically salary requests that were not honored at the rates they were requested. Most of the salary adjustments here are 2%. There are 2 admin salaries that are increasing 1%. They're not under contract, they negotiated one-on-one.
So the cost savings reflected here in 178 is with the user fee,
Right.
but we wouldn't know that. That could be a fluid number, correct?
Yes, but it's a more likely number than we would have if we eliminated it. Because at that point,
And let's say you only got half those people to opt in at that point, where does that money come back out of?
then we reconfigure busing.
To up the cost on the people that are using it?
No? To determine how to better schedule those buses so that we can eliminate some lines. We have some flexibility in busing, but not a lot. Am I correct, Fred?
Correct, very, very little flexibility. And the danger part would be parents, students, we can identify the students are not mandated, but we don't know the actual students that maybe 3 days out of the week, they don't ride the bus, or their parents drop off. You know,
Well, no, it wouldn't, those people would have to make a decision, either be bused or not be bused,
No, correct, so.
because there would be a cost factor
So
associated
the
with it.
question is, how many do you lose?
Right.
You know, how many, and then to reconfigure how many buses are we running, you know, per route, how full are they? And I think the impact is greater at the high school
Right.
with people not riding than it is at the elementary levels.
And the short answer is yes, it's a fluid number.
Brian has a question.
Since you're on the what-if scenarios, what if there's a family in town that has 5, 6 kids in this system? And we're talking 165 per student. What if? What if that person's on very limited income? I'm just giving you scenarios, that you're penalizing the less fortunate who probably need the help the most.
I just want to be clear on this. You're penalizing people who aren't entitled to the ride in the first place.
No, I understand.
This is non-mandated busing.
Yep.
This is the busing that you and I walk to school on,
Right,
that kids today don't.
I understand.
Parents have to make a value decision too.
But we set this up, and they're counting on this now. It's become, to them,
Common practice.
a common practice.
Well,
And-
give them 4 months to plan something
Yeah,
different.
yeah. And then, I know you said you had some flexibility with this busing. What if at the high school, and maybe
Well, the high school is all mandated.
middle school, where these people can't afford this, so they drop off, and now you have less ridership, but you're contracted for certain buses, and you've got a fixed fee for the season. So now you're not getting the revenue per pupil, and you're still paying the most
Well,
that you were contracted to pay.
I
So
believe-
don't you see a catch-22
Yeah, I believe
here?
the contract, if we could drop a bus, we can drop a bus and not be penalized, as far as that goes. I believe that's the way the contract would be.
Right.
So it all depends on the route.
Now, the challenge would be the configuration of the busing
Right.
line
Yeah.
with the people that remain.
Correct.
You know, just personally, I feel that if we're gonna try to be cutting costs, and we're trying to configure a new way to get revenue, save money, we don't need to be attacking the most vulnerable part of the community, which would be the children and the families that are maybe in a more vulnerable position than others. I think that maybe we should be looking in a different direction. That's just my personal opinion. I know that
I
you're gonna-
appreciate that you're saying that as a
Yep.
parent,
Yep.
you know, in general, but I think it's not a problem. I have 2 children one would be walking distance. He's excited to walk to school. The idea of
Maybe you don't have
walking
the
to
past
school.
couple of days.
Yeah, not the past one, maybe not, but parents help each other
Yeah.
drive in. But if it comes down to, will they get an education? If we're gonna cut
Yeah.
teachers, I think that walking can be seen in a positive light.
Yeah,
And I think we're looking at that.
I
And
understand that.
I also want to just add something quickly. When we're talking about being responsible financially, we're talking about adding value. And when we're talking about funding, where we fund, we should be considering where we add value. Value to people's homes,
Yeah.
value to people's minds. And, you know, that, I think he brought up earlier that, you know, that creates revenue. The schools do. Busing doesn't. So I think you really have to be mindful that way too.
I appreciate that your opinion on that. However, I do think that the amount of money that you're going to save, how much value would that add to the education? Is it going to be significant enough?
Yeah, if
To
you want
change
talk
an education.
significant, for instance, we save about 400,000 annually by staggering our start times. It was a cost savings measure the district came up with a few years ago. So you do have everybody, because we're using the same buses, we don't contract for the extra buses, et cetera. So the high school starts very early. Middle school does start early. You know, and then you have the elementaries that are all staggered.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be something we'd love to see back to a normalcy. But right now, it's just not in the cards. You know, we just take the hard gulp and say,
No,
it's not cost feasible.
The thing that I see now, the way the busing is, when I go down Forest Street, when, you know, you go down by Duval, the amount of lined up cars already that are people taking their children to and from. Now you institute this fee, and now you're gonna have double the cars. See how that on Forest Street looks at 3 o'clock.
Right, Dan?
Practical experience, which you may not know, buses aren't full because of those cars.
Yeah?
People aren't putting kids on the buses.
Right.
And they're driving, I mean,
And
Right.
taxpayers are
paying
paying
for
for that
that.
right now.
Yeah.
Because you go up to middle school, there's a loop that goes down and around down the street, waiting to get the kids picked up.
Yeah.
Those buses are leaving half empty, so
That's a way of looking at
I'm
it.
just giving you the what ifs, that's all. You know, I could be way off base, but I'm just saying, these are the things that are coming into my head
less the buses.
when we're talking about instituting fees. You know, extra fees. I can't remember which school district it was the other day. They instituted more fees for sports, higher fees for sports. Now, I understand sports is a luxury, but the way this lifestyle is now for children, spending more time playing video games and eating Cheetos in front of the TV instead of being out on sports, getting some exercise, you know, I wonder what fees are doing.
Can definitely, you know, debate that, because
Yeah.
in my mind, you put a kid on a sports team, you teach him leadership, you
Right.
teach him camaraderie.
Exactly.
You teach him to be dependent upon others and others to be dependent upon them. It doesn't get much better than that for real life experience in the future.
And this
That's
is-
my personal.
This is the pain of which we are in now.
Oh, we're in a lot of pain.
And just as a side note to this, talking about, he mentioned passive behavior. I would suggest that I don't even know if we could do this, but I would say that the school district and the town of Whitman should sue the state
They are.
to try to get this money
It was
that we
my
are supposed
motion.
to have.
Okay, it was my motion at our last meeting to sue the state for the past 10 years of underfunded
Yeah.
regional transportation monies.
Yeah.
It all keys about the word appropriate,
Yep.
and what does that word actually mean? If you look up Webster's, it's the act of assigning the fund. Now, the way the law is read, it says that the state shall fund 100% of regional transportation, subject to appropriation.
Mm.
So,
It's not
that's,
money.
to me, that's the mechanism of assigning the money.
Right.
So therefore, they don't have a choice whether or not to fund it at 65, 70%. They have to fund it at 100%. And I've called a few lawyers, haven't found any takers yet, because we did vote on a contingency or pro bono basis. I did speak to the Mass Association of Regional School Districts. They want to wait until after the budget season. There's a big push to try and get more regional money, which would help us. Who knows, because, you know, part of the other problem, and you say planning, you want to plan ahead, but if you don't know what your revenues are, and you get a governor's budget, and then you get the House one, and that just came out last week. So now you have all the amendments, and I've got to say it, no fault to our state representatives.
Yep.
Okay, they have fought and they have scrapped for every penny that they can get for our district. Josh Cutler has an amendment, Jeff Deal signed on to it. You know, they've been very, very aggressive in trying to get a groundswell of representatives to raise the budgets for regional school districts. Who knows where that'll pan out?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's a long-term
but we
thing,
can't
but
count on it.
You
You can't
They
count
have
on
to be
that
held
money.
accountable for their decisions.
Well, that's going to
Yep.
I know it's getting to be 25 past 8. You guys have to keep.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this affects 259 students, if we're looking at 1/3 of the non-mandated busing. Is that the number you came up with, 775 students that ride the bus, non-mandated busing? So I don't think it's a big number. I don't think it's gonna have, like, you know, your points are well taken, but I don't think it's gonna have that dramatic
Yeah.
effect.
Just go
And I
with
think
the
it's a
what if.
policy that needs to be looked at more than anything else. Because a lot of surrounding towns do have a fee for
Okay.
non-mandated busing. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at. But I don't think we need to spend
50.
too much more time on that.
Is there anything else as far as the budget's concerned? Fred,
Just the one thing I'd like to add on to the busing real quick. You could establish a family threshold so that it would only cost a maximum of X amount of dollars per family.
Yeah.
You could also establish some sort of a waiver, you know, for.
First 3 kids,
financial
first
need.
2 kids, anything after that is, yeah.
You could do that, and, you know,
Financial
financial need, if they
hardship,
demonstrate financial
yeah.
need, you know, you establish the guidelines, and therefore that's waived.
Okay. Rick, you have anything else for the board?
We just want to move to page 9, just to talk about the pro forma implications. Again, this is in the what-if scenarios, you're on page 9. So at the bottom of that page, you look at the Article 2, articles requesting raise and appropriate, and you look at the bottom lines for those three scenarios, and that's the numbers that you're coming up with. So as far as over the levy limit, am I correct, Frank? So at 9.5, you're looking at...
This is strictly Article 2, it doesn't include the articles.
Right. So you're looking at $603,743 over the levy limit at 9.5%.
So that would have to be an override.
Or drastic cuts within the town, yes, absolutely. And then I think the final page that you were provided with, if you have this, what the implications for the tax rate. The current tax rate for Whitman is 1601 per thousand of assessed value.
Yeah.
Does everybody have this page?
This is just Article
2.
2.
So Frank, you want to go over the different scenarios?
Well, clearly, this is a what-if that doesn't have a whole lot of oomph behind it because the what-ifs, for the most part, are unacceptable. We're not going to do a 5% budget. We're probably not going to do a 7.25% budget.
I would
So-
like to walk away from that, but
No, I wouldn't either, but you're talking $400,000. It's a hefty number.
At what, 7.25?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and bear in mind, we're not the only player in this process. There's another town, south and east of us, or at least east of us, that has a role in this process.
And they're not known for passing over.
And they're, I believe the number, Fred, if I'm not mistaken, they threw out a 7.5 number as one possibility, but I don't think there was ever any offer or commitment to do that. And the numbers are different for each town because of the affordability index. We have a larger share of the budget, consequently, we have more students, that's why we pay more.
So Frank, if we were to say we have 7.25, say 7.5, and our portion of that, let's bump it up to say 450,000, right? Because it's the extra 1/4%, right? If we did that in an override, what's that gonna cost the taxpayers?
I would be really opposed to a override that funds part of a deficit.
Right.
And doesn't fix the problem.
Right.
We did that once. It bought us a year's worth of time.
It's just a Band-Aid.
Right, it's bad, because
One
next
of
year,
the-
in the worst scenario.
One of the things that I prepared
It'd be like $61 though,
in going through
But that's
this
just-
budget,
for that.
I just had too many pieces of paper, Looking for, there they are. I wouldn't mind passing these down. I did a couple of analyses based on our current property values. Right now, fiscal year 2018, what am I stuck on? The average single-family house in Whitman is assessed at $278,400. The median single-family house in Whitman is $293,052. That's significant because it's an indicator that property values are increasing in Whitman. Because there are as many houses above that number as below it in the median, but the average is higher. So it means property values are increasing. The tax rate currently is $16.01. So right now, I'm just going to talk about the single-family house. At $278,400, the annual tax bill is $457.18.
That's what mine is, yeah.
So it's real easy. Just take your thousands and multiply them by 1601. We currently are servicing debt in the levy that we've talked about taking out of free cash and putting into the levy. What that would involve is a vote to exclude that debt from 2.5. That would be a town meeting and election vote. Actually be an election vote, it's already appropriated. That would cost that average single-family household $139.02 this year. If that vote were taken today, we would add $139, and I said 20 cents to that single-family house bill. The second example is the number that would completely fund Article 2. And that would be $1,200,000. That's a little more money. That's 79 cents per thousand, and would raise the average tax bill, the average single-family tax bill, by $219.94. Then if you put them together, which would free up free cash to become a targeted fund for capital, you would see the average bill go from $44.57 to $48.22, or a difference of $365, which is $1.31 on the tax rate. Now, I'm not going to kid you. Remember, there's a lot of people on that higher number that are going to see a significantly greater increase. But that's a fix that resolves the problem for this year. We would still have to deal with the future cost of education if nothing changes. We could vote this. We could provide the town services with everything they're looking for. We can provide the schools with everything that they need. And we can have a good year. But next year, we're back looking at an increase.
That's right.
Now we're talking 52.2 million. So there's another 2.2 million that has to be picked up by the two towns. And at the rate we're going, the cost will shift very slightly from 59.82% to 60%. But we haven't solved the problem. And with due respect to anyone who thinks that we need to do more planning, it's a revenue problem that needs to be addressed, and there's only two ways to address it. Reduce your expenses or increase your revenue. That's really where we are. Those are the only two options we have. I don't know whether the community as a whole has an appetite for an override. I have heard a number of people say over the last couple of years, Prop 2.5 has run its course, it no longer meets our needs. You know, you think back, all this started in California with Jarvis and Proposition 13. It was a really radical move 30 years ago. 40 years ago, not sure. It's a long time ago. And it worked there for a while, till Orange County went broke. And then they repealed it, you know. Proposition 13's gone. Taxes are now assessed annually based on markets and other things. What kind of community do we want to be? That's the bottom line.
Well, I think that what kind of community this town wants has to be decided by them. So I think that if we go with the top number and let them decide how they want their town to be, because they're the ultimate ones who are going to pay the bill. And
Well, and those people are going to be looking for direction.
And could this be, if this went to a ballot, be split?
Yes.
Whereas option A would not be a 2.5 override. You would just be restructuring that debt with an end date, correct?
Or you would just be voting to exclude that debt.
Right,
from the
but it
tax.
wouldn't be a 2.5 override.
No, it'd be a debt
No, it would be a
exclusion.
debt
Right, debt
exclusion.
exclusion.
For the remaining amount of
There would be an end
monies.
date, it wouldn't.
Yeah,
'cause
it'll
obviously with 2
it'll deteriorate, it'll drop as the debt drops.
Because you often hear that with the 2.5 override.
We actually have one
forever.
coming out
Right.
next year.
That wouldn't.
We currently have a debt exclusion that's in the,
Last year.
2 more years.
2 more years
sorry,
of it.
it's not, is that a debt exclusion? No, it's not. It's actually a debt within the levy. It's a
Yeah.
bad example. But that's going away in 2 years. Unfortunately, a lot of the debt that we've taken on is long-term. Most of our debt right now, other than the high school, is sewer and water related. You're not even seeing it in the tax bill, you're seeing it in the sewer and water rates you pay,
Right.
which goes back to that second article, that to avoid shocking people by bonding and then immediately passing on the cost, we're phasing it in next year. So this could be done. You could exclude the bond from our debt structure. However, that doesn't change our revenue. It only changes the free cash. And we made a decision as a town 5 years ago to use free cash to fund our capital needs. That was part of the plan.
Right. And
How
we
could
made
you
a
make that
commitment.
decision without any financial forecast? If you don't know how much you made or not, how could you make a promise about how you're gonna pay for it? It's not even logical.
Sean, it's very simple. The decision to commit the free cash to capital needs permitted us to evaluate from year to year how to prioritize those needs within the framework of our income. What I think you're missing, and I appreciate everything you're saying, is any operation, whether it's a household or a business, has to function based on resources. If you make $90,000 a year, then you're going, if you have any sense at all, you're going to make sure that the cost of your mortgage, the cost of your food, the cost of your clothing, the cost of educating your kids, the cost of an occasional night out, and the cost of any household improvements or renovations you want to make can fit within that $90,000 revenue. So you project out based on revenue. And that's what we did. And I don't know why you're having such a problem with it. It has worked for us. It may not work the way you want it.
The problem I have is that when I do the research, it says clearly, the first step in the budget process is the financial forecast. It'll tell you whether you should spend or cut, because if you don't have an accurate financial forecast, how could you do that? So to say that we made a promise 5 years ago without an accurate financial forecast, to me...
We had a forecast. We presented it at a town meeting. Maybe you weren't there. When we voted to do that work, to build the police station and to renovate the town hall, we presented all of that information. We demonstrated I gave you a 15-year history of revenues. And I demonstrated to you in that what the free cash was from year to year. The only thing I didn't give you was where it's coming from. And the only thing I'm certain about in free cash are the couple of items that we can identify to build it.
If I could just finish this point, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
What they're saying is, if you have a strategic plan, and you have a capital plan, and you have financial policy that guides your spending and borrowing practices, then, and only then, can you make an accurate financial forecast. Because if you don't have the three, at least together, then there's nothing binding you moving forward. Everything's constantly moving, so you can't quite predict. And that's the situation we're in. We don't have that binding structure to say, this is what we're gonna fund next year, and this is the policy which is gonna guide our spending and borrowing practices, therefore we can predict what we're gonna have next year. Without that infrastructure, you cannot have an accurate financial forecast. That's the logic that I'm having trouble with.
The
To say that
logic
we
you're
made a
having
promise.
trouble with is the limited nature of our revenue stream. That's your problem. That's our problem.
No, that's not my problem. That is our problem, but it's not my major problem.
For the sake of moving past the, argument's sake, problem I have with what you're saying, Sean, is neither if we wake up with the strategic or capital plan tomorrow in place and on the website, it doesn't correct the problem that we face. What you're doing is, it's like driving a boat out to sea, running out of gas, and then arguing over if we filled it up with high octane or regular unleaded. Doesn't matter how we got here, we're in a problem. And your solutions right now, although I agree with some of them, I agree with some of the practices, do not solve the problem right now. So we, as the appointed and elected officials in this town, need to solve the problem, not argue with each other.
It's a revenue problem.
As
right,
we
that's
say,
what we
it's a
can't count on.
revenue problem,
Right.
over and over again.
It's a revenue problem.
What are the things that you do to create revenues? What investments do you make to create revenues? I hear everybody saying, I don't want to make cuts across the board. Well, sometimes you have to create the revenue to then pay the next group. There are ways to fund a town that create revenue. And I think the guidance should be coming from the selectmen in that. And I know you want to send that to the people to vote, but they voted on you.
Right.
To create that guidance. And you can do some,
The thing about revenue is, you get extra revenue by getting businesses in Whitman,
okay?
okay? And the way we do that is by our tax rate being a factor of 1, so we don't chase business out because we have very little. We could turn around and change it so businesses pay more than the homeowner, but that would just chase them out.
I'm not saying that that's wrong, but there has been some proof that that isn't always what it is. Without other things, without other, enticing people to come in, having, some way to build businesses in the communities and support them, having a low tax rate still isn't going to, do anything for them.
But,
And
right.
even, we started this with have a better school system.
Yeah,
The best school systems bring in more people.
but also having, in the winter, clean streets and roads.
That is not what they look at a real estate
Oh.
place. I think you might, but when
Yeah.
you're looking at the major stuff, and you do it from the major, if you talk to any real estate agent, what's gonna sell your house? They're gonna look first at schools. And I'm just
I
saying
hear a
this
lot
in
of
terms of
compliments on-
financially, and the responsibility to the individual people in this town who own property, that we are building, helping them to build their own financial revenue in their homes. I mean, we have a financial responsibility there too.
Right, I agree with you completely, except we have to have that vote. We have to present it as a 2.5 override, which is forever, and they have to vote on it. We cannot.
Okay.
So we have to
And you can give
agree to
guidance
bring
there.
it forth to them, to let them decide. And they could very easily deep six it. I know Hanson does that quite often. So that's the plan, the part B, that's the wild card in this equation, because we could do everything right, and they can still
And what
put a
begins
fly in the ointment.
your plan for bringing businesses in? besides just keeping tax rates low, because how has that worked for you? We've done that.
Yeah, I don't see
You know,
us.
this is a road I'm sorry, I've had this conversation so many times over the last 15 years that my head's gonna pop.
There it goes.
There's a reason we don't have business in Whitman. The reason is the same reason they don't have business in Hanson. We're too far away from a highway. No business that creates and ships wants to be 25 minutes from the nearest highway. So as you draw a circle around 495, 24, or 128, I guarantee you, when you look at the industrial values, as you pass that circle, they drop off completely, because no one will drive there. That's the reason we don't have commercial.
You see less and less business coming from
And now,
Weymouth through
most
Abington
of the
to
large
Whitman,
parcels that
Bridgewater.
we've attempted to develop
Yeah,
have been developed, unfortunately, they've been developed as residential properties. You know, I tried last year to bring 2 years ago, to bring Wegmans in here.
right.
Wouldn't even talk to me. Don't meet their demographics, too far away. Same thing with
Depot.
Hannaford. Good thing I didn't do it, they got bought anyway. And then, last year, had some serious discussions with Market Basket.
Yeah.
Have we
Unfortunately,
begun to think about, and anything that I've read has said that you in isolated towns like ours, and I'm not, I
Yeah.
believe what you're saying is correct, there are other ways. We have 97% residential. Everybody here eats, everybody here buys cakes, everybody here does business outside of our town. Even just servicing the people in our town, attracting people to do that, saying, do you know where Whitman, Mass is? Finding a way to do some outreach. Even that can create revenue. We might not have to do big things, but grow our own, you know, and have resources there to teach people to have businesses or support businesses that are here. A small business event once a year. But I'm asking you, I'm not giving you the solutions, I'm asking your mind to start looking at revenue.
We
looking at
actually
how to
do that
revenue.
in the Taste of Whitman and Hanson.
we have
A number of times we've done things like that on a
Right.
regular basis.
one of the
wonderful.
few towns in the area that has a downtown district
Right.
that's actually functional, that has
It's beautiful.
minimal vacancies.
Right.
We see some turnover in the types of business, but our future is not going to be built attracting business to Whitman. We're never going to have a Derby Street here. I'd love to, but we're never going to have a Derby Street here.
Never say never.
Maybe if we evolve to the point where we're now
You know what sold me here? Sewage.
more highly taxed, higher revenue group of people, you can see some of those things. But you know, we're not Norwell either. And again, Norwell, Hingham, they're very successful. They're accessible.
Right. The Route 3 is right there.
We have to recognize that we have opportunities that present themselves periodically, and we encourage them. We license businesses that come to us. I can't remember the last time we said no to someone looking to operate a business in Whitman. It's been a lot of years.
I can.
The-
I know that we had a dog
Can I
business.
finish? There have been a few instances where the zoning board of appeals may have denied a use permit.
You can probably count it on one hand.
That's a different issue. We do welcome business. What we have to come to grips with is how we make the best of what we have to offer. And once again, I see Whitman as a bedroom community. I don't see it ever being anything but that.
And what are we, 98% built up?
We're 93, I think.
Three.
I want to say we're 82, 83% residential. 10% commercial, 2% industrial. You know, it's,
Well-
we have to work with what we're given.
Yeah. All right, so I guess our next meeting, we're gonna have to discuss whether or not we wanna go with this, one of these scenarios.
Well, if we
Frank?
want to go with this, the next meeting's too late. If you're suggesting that the plan is to present a budget that includes an override, we have to decide what portion of that budget is going to be in the override. And we have to let people know about it and give them time to absorb it and understand it. There are going to be a lot of questions. There are issues.
Well, the only thing I can see that makes sense, and I hate saying this because we promised to do it inside the levy limit, to use free cash, is A, if we were to take the police station, town hall renovations out of free cash, paying for it for free cash, and putting it in to a debt exclusion, freeing up that amount of, a certain amount of money
Yep.
within the levy limit, it doesn't change anything other than being able to give the schools that extra $763,000.
I think you want to rethink that because what you would be doing is building the school's budget on free cash.
Right, well, that's coming out of free cash and not the levy limit, you're right. You're right.
And that might not be enough to really help you much.
What it
Anyway.
would do is it would allow you to be able to spend for capital items out of free cash.
Right.
The whole idea of the free cash pocket was to support capital.
And pay last year's bills. You know, previous year, the bills that were in.
When is the drop dead date for going forward with that plan?
We are meeting next Monday night, school committee.
You changed it to Wednesday, Friday.
Monday?
That helps us a little bit because it gives us
All
Tuesday.
right, I want to see you tomorrow night.
So we would have 2 weeks from our 20, right? It's been 2 weeks. I mean, I would rather wait for a full board to make a
Yeah,
decision like this.
right, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's why I was saying, if you know when the drop dead date is, the last moment that we can make a decision like this to go forward, and we meet, whether it be executive session or whatever it takes.
Well,
I
you
don't
can't
know,
do
but-
that in executive
No,
session.
but
I
we
mean,
can-
as far as the last possible.
Meeting the last day in the afternoon or something like that. Just as one item, huh?
The warrant has to be posted no less than 7 days before town meeting. Town meeting is March 7th. The warrant has to be posted before April 30th.
So we're meeting the 24th, next Tuesday.
Which would be when it would be likely that you would sign the warrant and then post it.
I guess we discussed that night the route we want to go and make a decision that night with the full board?
Well, we have some budget document preparation we need to do to let people know what
Right.
they're going to be acting on. An override does not appear on the warrant. An override is the result of the board voting to schedule an election to override Prop 2.5.
Can
You
we
may
have,
want to make conditional, we've done this in the past. We funded a portion of the budget inside the levy limit, and we've made the balance of that appropriation
Conditional on
subject
override.
to a Prop 2.5 override. Now, the longer we wait, the longer for that election, because you have to give at least 35 days for a ballot question.
so we couldn't put it in with the town
It
election?
would be in June.
It would be in June. The question is when in June?
We're reacting.
So I guess our only alternative is to keep looking at the budget and cutting it,
Well, it'd be nice,
to find out what the schools are going to vote
that's
first.
really what we have to wait
Right.
for, the other shoe to drop there, and
Right.
then we
That's
can move
Monday,
forward.
is it?
And we're meeting on Tuesday as well.
You know, there's another scenario you haven't considered. on May 7th, town meeting is going to decide what the town can spend. And town meeting can vote any number, and in the past, town meeting has voted to spend more than we had, and we've had to come back in the fall and cut budgets. That has happened.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened in a long time, but it happened during the time I was on the finance committee. People didn't want to listen when the levy limit was explained at town meeting. People wanted money, they voted everything, and we wound up being 200 and some odd thousand over. And we had to cut budgets. And there were some pretty aggressive cuts. Now, May 7th is a town meeting for everyone who has money requests on the warrant. It's every department, including schools, to present their arguments for their budgets. If a budget is voted that is in the range that we're talking about here, and that budget is voted by both towns, the only option we have is to come back and reduce town budgets on other departments in the town. Once a regional budget is certified, it cannot be reduced. You can't cut it.
There's one other alternative, I think. We could use money out of stabilization to fund this year's budget and then organize, a bigger effort next year.
That would be a bloodbath on the floor. But it's a legal process. It is legal to do that.
But see, that's like using your home
Retirement.
your home banking account, and to pay for your food, and all of a sudden, when your bank runs dry, you go hungry.
Yeah.
That's
Not recommended.
no.
Sean,
not at all.
we've always known that option was there. We've never addressed it because one of the things that stabilization provides for is a source for emergencies that can't be handled by anything other than a town meeting vote and a quick appropriation. And it affects our bond rating. We just issued a bond with a decent credit rating. It was an average rating, I want to say AA3. I had hoped to see something better because our reserves had grown. And when Standard & Poor, Moody's, Standard & Poor, Moody's, S&P, rated us, one of the comments they made was they've seen positive movement. However, they would not be willing to upgrade until they saw a more healthy reserve plan. Now, we have healthy reserves. We have 4.9 million in sewer and water. We have 2.4 million in stabilization. We have just under $1 million in capital stabilization. And my answer is that's where I would have taken the money to balance off that last 150,000 by using that money to fund capital items, not budget items.
Right.
Capital stabilization can only be used for capital expenditures. And then we have a couple of really small accounts. But if we take $1 million out of stabilization to balance this year's budget, we're now down to $1.4 million. And we still don't have a solution because using that money just exacerbates next year's budget, because now the increase won't be 1.4 million, it'll be 2.8 million. Unless you're gonna use the rest of the
Instead of
stabilization.
being reactive, you used the boat analogy. How are we any different than we were last year out in the ocean? We're moving further and further out, we're not moving back, And then any effort we put forth now is gonna be reactive, it's not gonna be very efficient with ballots and those sorts of things. At least it would allow us to be proactive and coordinate, maybe get some of that policy in place so that we can win some confidence from the people and get things moving in the right direction. if we were a boat right now, we wouldn't have a captain, and we wouldn't have a rudder. We just move.
Sean, I resent that statement. You know, you've been taking pot shots all night.
Now, calm down. Go ahead.
You're incredibly arrogant. You have the answer to everything, but you haven't given one damn answer yet. You've talked about policies, you've talked about manuals. Tell me how that's going to increase money. I want to hear it. You have the answers. I'd like to hear it. I am tired of listening to this rhetoric.
Sure. So, say you want to ask somebody for money. We are the keeper of people's property. You want to win faith and confidence in what you do. The best way to do that is to have a plan, is to have a forecast, is to show that you have an intelligent argument. Right now, we don't have a strategic plan. We don't have a capital plan. We don't have all those things, and we're being reactive. So people watching this right now are thinking, why would I support an organization that's not very efficient? This sounds foolish to me. Whereas if we were in front of the curve and we said, hey, we knew this was going to happen. 2 years ago, we knew this was going to happen. Here's the due diligence we did. Here are the reports. Now, have confidence in us that we know what we're doing. That's what I would do. And you're more apt to get people to invest in an organization like that. That's exactly what I would do, Frank.
And you don't remember hearing that last year and the year before?
I want to know who raised their hand to implement policy to create that infrastructure so that next year at this time, we're sitting in a better position. Who's doing that right now? This is on us.
Sean,
Let's do it.
what you never like to take into consideration, though, is that we're trying to fund a budget that's been underfunded by another party. So we're trying to make that up within our town.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's growing at a rate faster than our town's revenue is growing. You overlook those in every time you make a statement. No, you do.
I agree with you.
Every statement you make overlooks those 2 points. So it's very unfair to the people sitting on these boards that, I don't know if it's just coincidence you overlook them or you purposely do it.
No,
But that's a giant factor.
I started this by saying we're in a triage situation. That is the triage. But when you're in a triage situation, if you don't mind, I'll finish my thought.
Being in the position.
You
when-
want
when
people
these-
to have confidence in those leaders. So to have confidence in a leader in a triage situation, you want to
Jack,
know.
can we,
Move it on.
yeah, I mean, this is just rhetoric we've heard.
First of all, the
25 times.
confidence that you see in this leadership is shown every May in an election. You feel strongly about it, put your name out there.
Mr.
Right
Chairman-
now, you've got 4 people that have been elected to do the jobs that they're doing.
All right, enough's enough. We're going.
Mr. Chairman, I think we are ready to retire to our
Okay.
Finance Committee meeting to
All right,
continue the business that we need to do.
right, let us, and then we'll let Frank know about where you're going, where you
Yep.
come from, and then we'll move on.
All right, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay? Got a little hot and heavy. Thank you.
I apologize for losing my patience.
It's okay. At least they know we're thinking about it. Good luck next year.
Should have used your line.
Huh?
We could easily print some $100 bills.
Fine.
Downstairs, we have room for the print.
Every time.
You should have used your line.
Whatever. We all set?
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Next.
Our next meeting, we'll probably discuss the regional agreement, so you may want to
Yeah,
fill us in. Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. The next item on new business is act on the request of Dan Driscoll on behalf of Whitman Baseball and Softball Association to change the date of the annual opening day parade to Saturday, April 21st, 2018, beginning at 9 a.m. and with a rain date of Saturday, April 28th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Next one is act on the request of Town Clerk Don Valley to appoint checkers for the May 7th annual and special town meeting, and those 4 checkers will be Sheila McVeigh, Priscilla Waugh, Leanne Valancourt, and Carol O'Brien. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion?
I don't know about that O'Brien character.
Whatever. All in favor?
Aye.
That's it, around the board. 20,
While the meeting was in progress, Barbara Bush died on this morning at her seniors.
Really?
yeah.
She did die.
Yeah, sadly, she passed away. She's been ill for a little while. I might suggest that we just take a moment of silence and respect for Mrs. Bush.
Thank you for letting us know that. Around the board, Frank, you have anything?
Sorry for the deviation before.
Oh, it
Ready
was
to go
fun.
into executive session.
Randy, anything? Scott?
I'm all set. I'm good.
Brian?
Well, I'm going to concur with you, Frank, and I think it needs to be said because I'm offended at the way it was suggested that this board lacks leadership. I've been on this board since 2004. We have been very efficient in those times with our budgets. And we've been very fiscally conservative and reasonable with what we've done over these years. And where other towns have been in this kind of situation we're in now, much before we have. And for us, 5 years ago, to do that renovation and the new police station within the levy limit was unheard of at the time. And it was an extremely big effort by Frank and the Finance Committee at the time, Bill Capozzi in particular. And it was the right thing to do at the right time.
Well,
And
I do emphasize that the decisions we've made over the years have been sound, have been practical, have been well-informed. I've
Right.
never had a situation where we didn't put the information out
right.
to get things done, despite the intimation that we don't. Maybe we can do it a little differently, maybe we can do it a little better. I'm certainly willing to work on that. I'm not a big pro forma person. Don't do something because it looks good. Do something
Right.
because it has some meaning
Right.
and because it has some effect.
Right.
We have a cash policy. We have a investment policy. We have a somewhat limited capital plan. But that limit is based on the practicality that we have to live within our revenue stream. And the biggest single challenge to this is the fact that 46% of the school's budget is funded through a revenue that is not increasing while the expenses are. And that's become a top-heavy situation. Any increase, whether it's 1%, 2%, or 3%, to the school is a 6% increase to us because we have to carry the entire burden. The state is not picking up
Right.
that portion. And on top of that, they're holding back money that they've mandated the school spend. So we have a crisis. The crisis is caused by the budget that we were presented. It's no shock to anyone. Last year, when we had the budget for $1 million, it was, what was it, $1.1 million, I think? I said, look, we can do this, but that's just going to put us further behind the hole next year.
Right.
That wasn't prophecy. That was obvious.
Right.
Right.
Foresight.
So I think that the comments that were made tonight, I'm not sure what the purpose of them was, whether it was to criticize, well, obviously it was to criticize what we're doing, but I don't know what the motivation is. It's because the belief that the state provides guides for capital planning and municipal operations. And while we have our own guidelines for what we do, it's not the manual that Mr. Kane would like us to adopt. A manual isn't going to work us out of this.
Not going to solve the problem.
And a capital plan isn't going to change the
Revenue is our
fact
problem.
that we
That's-
have no capital funds.
And the thing about us, we're not Framingham. You know, we're not Natick, we're not Boston. We're 6.9 square mile Whitman, full of blue collar, full of bedrooms. And
Well, and that's the point, and that's the community we have, and we have to work within that framework.
I mean, everybody on this
probably
board,
we should
including
end this
yourself and Lisa Green, worked very hard to make this community the best we could possibly make it. And for someone to suggest that we have passive leadership, to me, who then votes to abstain on all the votes
I know
that
it.
he made just to get our special town meeting warrant on the books, I find rather humorous.
It's very easy to criticize when you don't have a solution, you just don't have to offer a plan.
And I suggest that this hubbub is political in nature.
Okay, enough said,
Thank you.
okay? Before Laurie kills me. We need to go into executive session in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health, rather than professional competence of an individual, and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if and when an open meeting has a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, the chair so declares. I need a motion to go into exec.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session. We will come out of executive session to adjourn only. All right, Laura, you going to kill us?